So, it's me again. Hi, everyone. Who isn't a fan of Succession? And the blustering, withholding, cantankerous patriarch of the Waystar Royco dynasty, Logan Roy. Brian Cox practically reaches and grabs you through the screen with his withering stare, explosive temper, and voracious ambition. Don't believe me? Let's take a look.
This is not the end.
Oh, what?
I'm going to build something better. Something faster, lighter, meaner, wilder. And I'm going to do it from in here, whether you're on. You're fucking pirates!
Give him... But this is not Brian's first rodeo. He began his career as a classically trained Shakespearean actor and has spent the last 6 decades working on both the stage and screen, inhabiting countless iconic characters, and not surprisingly, racking up 2 BAFTAs, 2 Olivier Awards, an Emmy, a Golden Globe, and a Screen Actors Guild Award, with many more, I'm sure, still to come. Please welcome Brian Cox.
Thank you.
I'm so thrilled to be talking to you, but first I have to ask you, Brian, do people really come up to you on the street and ask you to tell them to fuck off?
All the fucking time. And I mean, the most bizarre incident of that was when it was the Golden Globes time, and I was in LA, and Rosanna Arquette is an old friend of mine, and she said, there's a Me Too meeting going on this weekend with Ronan Farrow. He's coming and he's going to read some stuff from his book, and would you come along and watch? And it was full of these Hollywood-type women, and I said, oh, sure, I'd love to come on. But I arrived late, so I'm standing at the back watching him doing his stuff, and it was very impressive indeed. And he finished, and they gave him a round of applause. And they turned around, and they saw me, and they immediately went, they get their devices out, and they went up to me, and they said, could you tell us to fuck off? And I said, is that really appropriate at a Me Too meeting? That you ask a white dinosaur like me, because that's what they call me now, I'm a white dinosaur, that to tell you to fuck off? Well, fuck off then.
By the way, I want to just mention that Brian's wife, Nicole, is here, who's also an actress. Nicole, where are you? I just want to recognize you. Hi, Nicole.
Where is she?
Welcome to Aspen.
Where is she?
So let's talk about Succession, Brian. What did you think when you first got that script?
Well, you don't get a script. that's a common illusion. You get a script when you start to do it, but you get the pitch or the idea, and that was what was there for me. And I knew straight away it was going to be a success, because it's very much in. I mean, even though it's a whole different ball game because of the satiric nature of it, but it's very much in the Dallas dynasty. It's in that kind of league of the.
I like how you say dynasty.
Yeah. Oh, it's supposed to dynasty. Yeah. I wish Americans could learn how to fucking pronounce properly. It really does fucking annoy me how they have. I get so confused. Anyway, so I knew that it was going, and then because of the subject. And Jesse had written a film about the Murdochs before, and I knew it was just going to be a success. Adam McKay, and the irony was, and this is another irony, so I'm listening to this, and I said to Jesse, I said, he could be Scots, Logan Roy, and Jesse said, oh, no, he can't be Scots, he's got to be American, Adam McKay, on the other hand, and there's another thing that the Americans have done to the Scottish language, we don't say McKay in Scotland, we say Mackay. That's how you properly pronounce that name, Mackay. Anyway, Adam Mackay, he thought, because he's ex-Scot, well, his family were 100 years ago, he said, I think that's a great idea. No, it's got to be American. So we left it at that. And then in the ninth episode of the first series, well, actually in the first episode, they said he's got to be from the States. So I'm working on it, I'm doing it, and again, you get the script incrementally, you don't always get the whole thing. Well, we do a reading, but then they rewrite it. So I get the script, and it says, born in Quebec. And I thought, I didn't know Quebec was in the States. I always thought that was Canada. And anyway, so I was born in Quebec, but I'd already started doing whatever accent I was doing. The ninth episode, Peter Friedman, who plays Frank, who I keep firing and rehiring, he said, they've changed your birthplace. I said, what do you mean they've changed my birthplace? He said, you're no longer born in Quebec. I said, so where am I born? He said, oh, I can't remember. And then he took his device out and he went and he said, oh yeah. He said, somewhere called Dundee, Scotland. And I said, but that's where I was born. And he said, oh, that's a coincidence. I said, yeah, it's a hell of a fucking coincidence. I said, this is the ninth episode, and now you're telling me I'm Scots? And I thought I was American Quebecian, or Quebecois American. I said, this is ridiculous. So I go up to Jesse and I said, so what is with the change of nationality? And this is typical of writers. He said, oh, we all thought it'd be a little surprise. I said, it's a hell of a fucking surprise. I said, I've been working on the show for 9 episodes, and suddenly I'm this, Scot. Anyway.
I'm so glad I asked everyone at the Aspen Institute if I could drop an F-bomb during this interview.
Sorry, you've started me off now.
It's fine.
My language is normally quite good until I get into situations like this.
Well, let's talk about, you mentioned it's like Dynasty or Dynasty and some other sort of dramatic shows, but let's talk about it a little bit more, Brian. What is it about Succession that just grabbed people and made them, so excited week after week to see what was going to happen?
I think we live in this age of the ultra-rich, and we see it all the time with the horrible Trump and Elon Musk and Bezos. We see the rich are getting richer, and the gap. As a follow-up, I did a program which has not been released here yet, called How the Other Half Lives.
I know, I actually watched the trailer.
Oh,
it looks amazing.
So that was a heartfelt thing, because I had to go home to my hometown and see how poor people had become and how worse it was even than when I was a kid. I mean, depersonalization. In the block of flats that I lived in, everybody had their name on the door, but now they've taken that away, and they all have numbers. So this whole depersonalization that goes on, and the poor are getting poorer, and the rich are getting richer. And then the other thing that goes with the rich is this sense of entitlement. And that's what you're dealing with in the show. And it's satirical, but it's also about the state of the world as it is at the moment. And that's why I think it's a very original and very unique show in that way.
When I was watching it, sometimes I would think, I loved it, and I thought the writing, obviously the acting, but I would kind of say to myself, I don't like any of these people.
No, this is the interesting thing. Everybody didn't like the people, but then they couldn't do without them. They wanted to watch it more and more and more, and that's the strength of the show. It's also essentially comic in its undercurrent. So there's a lot of that element, and you see it with people like Kieran, and Nick Braun, and even Matthew McFadden, and occasionally me. So. That element is quite strong, that satirical humor that goes through it. And it's also something that's very because predominantly we have 2 or 3 American writers, but it's predominantly British writers. All of them are mainly British. And so they have that kind of sharp political sensibility, to get at the subject.
I called our mutual friend, Frank Rich, who's an executive producer on Succession to see if I could get some inside scoop on you. He said, he told me you'd be the easiest interview of my career. So he also wanted me to ask you about your loving, almost parental relationships with some of the actors on the show, like Kieran Culkin and Sarah Snook. So talk to me about, and all of us, about working with some of these enormously talented young actors.
Well, you know, Sarah was already an accomplished actress. I mean, she had a very fine career in Australia in the theatre, and she's just astonishing. Her diction sometimes I worry about, but she's quite good.
She's Australian.
No, it's not just the Australian, it's the ends of... I'm going to talk about that tonight when I'm doing the Shakespeare thing. You know, clarity is important, you know, and in a show like this, you sometimes can toss the words away a little too much. Anyway, that's a different note. But Sarah is formidable. She's absolutely formidable in the role. I mean, in the last series, the last two episodes, the last episode that my wife insisted I watch, I never watch it. I always view it's bad enough doing it without having to watch it. But my wife does make me watch it. And it was so good, and she was so extraordinary in that last episode, as was Matthew, both of them. But the real hero for me is Kieran Culkin. Thank you. Because Kieran, you know, he'd not worked for quite a while. He came along, and they originally were thinking him for Nick, for Nick's part, Greg. And he wasn't interested in Greg. He really wanted to play Roman. And he got the role, finally got the role. And when he came, when he started, he was very nervous. This was a big job for him. And to see his growth over the 6 years that we've been working is phenomenal. When we always get, everybody used to get these, what they call alt lines, because essentially our writers are comic writers. They always have the alt lines, so there's always an alt gag. Now, when it was first suggested to Kieran, he had 2 alt lines, and he freaked out. He didn't know what to do. He thought, what am I going to do? I said, you'll be fine. Just do it. It's okay. You'll be fine. By the end of the show, he was doing 5 pages of alt lines.
You kind of got that sense,
yeah,
because he's so...
And he just became more and more wonderful. And to see him grow and gain in confidence, and to see what a job does to an actor in that way, where suddenly they blossom in the most extraordinary way. And that was what was so wonderful about working with Kieran and seeing him come to that, as you know, as with the others.
You know, meanwhile, though, it's pretty obvious that Jeremy Strong, Brian, got on your last nerve. He plays Kendall Roy, and he's a method actor. I've been reading a lot about this and insisted on staying in character when you say he should celebrate his gift and go back to his trailer and have a hit of marijuana.
That's the best way to do it.
Why are you not a fan of method acting, and how does that differ from your approach to a role?
Well, I'll tell you what happened. I'll try and make it as short as I can. The group theater in the 1930s in New York, which was Elia Kazan, John Garfield, Lee Strasberg, Cheryl Crawford, Bobby Lewis, sorry. And they started this group theater. And they all were great believers in the work of Stanislavski. And there was this one element in Stanislavski's work, which was called, the Americans, you guys call it emotional memory. Stanislavski called it affective memory. And it's a kind of condition that you go through where you revisit trauma of childhood. And it's supposed to open you up emotionally. But it's without thought, and that's what the difficulty is. So the great Stella Adler was very questioning about what was going on. So she decided to take herself to Paris, where she knew that Stanislavski spent the summers, because he was allowed to do that. And she went to see him, and she said, Maestro, we've started this group theater, and we're all great believers in your work, and we want to know, we're just questioning the notion of affective and emotional memory. And Stanislavski, I got rid of that years ago. He said, no. He said, no, it's fine. in minuscule form, if there's a necessary thing that needs to be dealt with. He said, but it does interfere with the imagination. It stops the imagination flowing. And that's why I stopped it. So she goes back to New York, and there's this big meeting. They're all in the theater. And she comes to the question, so what did the maestro say? And he said, well, effective emotional memory, he doesn't believe in it anymore. And there was a silence. And Strasberg said, then Stanislavski is wrong. Hence the method acting. And I mean, it worked for a certain extent. I mean, it was great in the 50s. But you see, Brando, contrary to what everybody felt, Brando was never a method actor. James Dean was, but Brando never was. Paul Newman was, because Brando actually studied with Stella Adler. He didn't study with Strasberg at all. I mean, he went to a couple of his classes and fooled around. He was a bit naughty that way. But it's interesting. And what I believe that actors are is that I think we are instruments. We're transmitters. We transmit energy. Energy comes through us. And, I've worked with a lot of children, and I think children are the best actors. They don't do research. They don't prepare their roles. They don't go into an emotion. They just do it. And they do it because of the power of their imagination. There's a video which I would recommend to you.
Oh, it's on YouTube. Is this the one you teaching the child Hamlet?
Yeah. Have you seen it?
I haven't, but I read about it, and I'm going to.
I teach this 2.5-year-old boy to be or not to be, the speech, Hamlet speech. And he's extraordinary. He gets distracted, but he comes back. And it's wonderful to watch this kid who's just has a natural imagination that he allows to flow into the words. Now, that's what's important, is always never interfere with the imagination. Keep it free, keep it light. Of course, you go into dark areas, and that's part of the job. But sometimes, if you over-involve it, you kind of, it disrupts the harmony of the group.
Did you ever say to Jeremy Strong, knock it off?
No.
Did you want to?
What?
Did you want to?
Constantly. But I don't do that.
Yeah.
I wouldn't do that. I mean, he knows how I stand, and we've, so that it's all come out. And we're very sweet. I love acting with Jeremy. Don't get me wrong. Jeremy's a wonderful actor. I just don't think he needs all that nonsense. I think he can do it without all of that. And he has, my example of that is Dan Day-Lewis, who is a brilliant actor, absolutely brilliant actor. I was watching the program that's on Steven Spielberg, and it was showing him, revisiting him as Abraham Lincoln. I thought it was an amazing performance. But Dan retires at the age of 55. From my point of view, as a 77-year-old, 55 was when the parts started to get better. That's when you really started to enjoy the work, because suddenly at the age of 55 you think, well, I know a bit now, I can actually do it a wee bit, But Dan's going, no, it's too much, it's all too painful, and you go, oh, bollocks, just do it.
And you've got incredible, exciting projects, which we'll talk about in a moment, but I want to talk a little bit more about Logan Roy, if I may. Mm-hmm. You talk about this character, how it's never fully explored, Logan, what makes him tick. And you said in one interview that it comes from a bitter experience. It's a mystery because Jesse Armstrong hasn't revealed it. I mean, you saw me swimming in season 1, episode 7, and you see the marks on my back, but it's never explained. When you were playing Logan Roy, did you think about childhood hurts or trauma, or what was motivating this very complicated man?
Well, it all lies with his sister Rose. He has a sister Rose. It's very interesting that, I don't know if Jesse realizes this, but the girl in the Glass Menagerie, Tennessee Williams' sister, is called Rose, ironically enough. So she had polio. She got polio, and he may have given it to her. That's what he feels. So that's his bitter thing. That's his thing that he's most angry with himself for, and he blames himself for the death of his sister. And Jamie Cromwell, in the funeral scene, does this brilliant oration. I thought it was really moving, and then Kieran's reaction was just equally moving about telling the story, the background of the family. And I just felt that Logan is constantly misunderstood. He's regarded as being this bully or Hector. Well, he does all of that. But all he wants to do is find a successor from his own children to take over his job, to take over the business. And they don't, I mean, my favorite line in the whole show is, you know, I love you, but you are not serious people. And that is the clue to everything.
It's really about entitlement.
Exactly, it's about entitlement. That they're playing the entitlement game all the time. That they haven't naturally. They're there at the front line, so therefore they should be able to take over and should be. But they haven't got the balls to do it. None of them. And also, they vacillate so much. I mean, he thinks that he has a strong feeling about Shiv. He really does think that Shiv could do it, and he hopes that. But then Shiv, she just dissipates everything. She talks too much. She's going to one way, then the other. She loses the singularity of purpose, which she so clearly has in the beginning episodes, and it becomes very dissipated. So Logan is always in a state of having to deal with these children and deal with them in a way, you know, yes, he's hectoring, yes, he's bullying, and yes, he's a particularly tough father. And he doesn't know how to express himself because he's never known how to express himself. So that's his loss, that's his tragedy, if you like. But I've always felt, I mean, there's an example. In the last episode of the end of the third season, when Jeremy and I had that big sit-down dinner together, and Jeremy, the guy brings on plates, and he hands the plate, and he said, "Oh, that's not for him. And I know that that Kendall has done that to make me think, oh, that's poisoned, you know, and I go along with it. Because I know it's not poisoned, but I think it's a bloody silly thing to just do that thing of thinking, trying to make me think this is a poisoned plate. And so I bring in my grandson, and I get him to test the thing. And everybody thinks, oh, it's horrible what he's doing to his grandson. He's no intention of poisoning his grandson, because the bloody thing isn't poison. He knows that. But of course, everybody thinks, oh, that's so cruel. But they don't understand what the real motive is. The real motive is to say, listen, Kendall, you are making such a stupid mistake. And doing these little gestures where you're trying to make me think one thing will not work. It will not work. It will not cut any mustard with me. And that's what's so great about the role, is the role is open to such delicacy of interpretation.
I want to spend a few minutes just talking about your childhood, Brian, because you grew up, as you mentioned, in working class Dundee. Your father was a shopkeeper. Your mom worked at a jute mill.
She did originally, yeah.
And I know your dad died when you were just 8 years old and left you and your mom pretty destitute.
Yeah.
You've said that your early life in poverty affects you even today.
Oh yeah. It's like
talk about that.
It's the Damocles sword that hangs over my head. I mean, it just is. You know, when you live at the level of poverty that we lived at after my father passed, it was pretty awful. But the irony was, I didn't feel it at the time. I just got on with it, as you do. You just adjust. You know, you lose somebody, you adjust. And, you know, it's just, you know, we so underestimate our own powers. We're constantly looking at belief systems to help us out, but we forget about who we are, how important memory is to us, and how we are sustained by memory. And we underestimate memory because we all have it. That's what we all share. We all share the memories of our loved ones, of those who've passed. And we carry those. I mean, my sister, my 92-year-old sister, who looked after me a lot from a distance when I was, you know, at that time, she passed just recently, and she's still with me. I mean, she'll always be with me. My dad is still with me. My mom is still with me. These people are still with us. And we forget that's an extraordinary power that we have, that power to hold on to those people from the past.
You lived across from a fish and chip shop.
Yeah.
And you would go over there as a little boy asking, well, you tell the story.
Well, it only happened didn't happen all the time, but I mean, my mother was she was in a hospital for nervous diseases. She had a series of nervous breakdowns, and then she had electric shock treatment, which, I mean, she lost something like, I think she lost about, I don't know, well, I can only say in English, 5 stone, which is a lot of 5 4s of 25, 70 pounds. She lost 70 pounds. And she was very thin. And she only got her pension on a Friday morning. So on Thursday, we probably didn't have any money at all. So it wasn't all the time, it was once or twice. So I would go across to the fish and chip shop, and I would ask for batter bits from the back of the chip pan. And that would be our dinner. So they would pack up the batter bits and give it to us, and that's what we ate.
I know that the theater, acting, movies, kind of, they saved you in a way.
Oh, yeah.
I read that there were 21, how could this be, 21 movie
21
theaters?
cinemas. There were 21 cinemas in my hometown in the 50s. Now there are 3. And it was amazing.
You would go constantly?
I'd go to all of them. From the age, I went to the cinema, this is the other thing, I went to the cinema on my own from the age of 6. You know, I would go off, disappear. And my mother said, "Where have you been?" I said, "Been in the movies, in the pictures." We called it the pictures back home.
And you fell in love with one actor in particular.
Mm-hmm. Tracy, yeah. Spencer Tracy, to me, is probably the greatest screen actor ever because of his delicacy, his commitment, and his comedy. I mean, TCM is under great threat at the moment. Warner Brothers wants to stop it, and I think it's a shame. It's tragic. Because Turner Classic Movies provides an enormous service about the history of cinema. And to see, there's just been a Katharine Hepburn season, to see Hepburn and Tracy in the movies they did together, and to see the delicacy and the beauty of the work they did is, for me, it's a joy. I mean, it's like, it's my encyclopedia,
You not only went to see movies several times a week, but you joined the Dundee Repertory Theatre when you were just 14.
Yeah, well, I got the job when I was 14, but I started when I was 50.
But you went there to run errands, right?
Yeah, I just used to take the money to the bank, and I did a lot of idiotic things as well.
And then you left for London at 17.
Yeah, I went to, yeah.
And
as soon as I walked into the theatre, because my family had become so broken up, I felt at home. I felt this was my home. And I felt that all my life. I mean, the theatre has really sustained me, and I'm so grateful to it.
Was there a moment when you realized this is my gift, this is what I want to do, this is where I'm going to put all my energy?
Yeah, I mean, it's the same commitment that a priest has, that anybody who wants some kind of spiritual experience has, because there's a lot of spiritual stuff comes out of the theatre, actually.
Was there a role, though? Was there a moment? Do you remember, or do you remember just feeling?
No, I just gradually, it came bit by bit, and it's so weird now that I play this iconic figure at the age of, I'm now 77, and it's just so bizarre, because I've done so much over the years. I mean, I've made something like about 209 films altogether, which is probably more than most people, because I just kept working. I mean, my thing was just to keep working. And then Jesse comes up with this role, and my life literally changes overnight.
I mean, do you like it? Does it make you uncomfortable? How do you feel about this newfound fame, if you will?
Well, it's lovely on one level, but I didn't realize how much I prized my anonymity. The fact that people didn't know who I was. And I actually quite liked that. I mean, people would say, "Oh, you were, oh no. Yes, you were, weren't you? Oh no, you weren't." That was usually what it was for me. But, now it's, I can't go anywhere. I mean, it's just really difficult. I mean, I did a fashion show with Nicole. We did this fashion show in Paris just recently. And now
you were attending, you weren't on the runway.
I wasn't on the runway, but they put me in clothes.
He's become quite the fashionista.
Well, I'm now, according to GQ, the fashion icon of the moment. I mean,
And I like your Ralph Lauren outfit.
exactly, but I could barely tie my shoelaces. I really find it extraordinary, really.
Well, I think it's so exciting to see this success, even though you've had the talent all along. And I mentioned all these exciting projects you have on the horizon. Next year, you'll be playing James Tyrone in Long Day's Journey into Night on the West End. You're also set to play Johann Sebastian Bach.
Yeah, I'm doing that in September.
In September?
Yeah,
and it's called Score? Is that a play?
It's a score. It's a play written by Oliver Cotton, and it's about Bach. It's very much in the line of what's going on now, warmongering with Putin, and Frederick the Great was a great warmonger, and Bach, Frederick the Great wanted him to join his coterie of composers because he collected them, and he was a closet composer himself, and Bach resisted, and it's a really interesting play about how he dealt with it. And we're going to do that in Bath.
You also have your directorial debut.
I have which was supposed to happen now, but I've delayed that till next year. So I'm doing
That's a film called Glen
Rothen. It's a film about two brothers running. Well, one brother runs the distillery, and the other brother was the talent, but he left 35 years before, and he's been brought back into the fold for different reasons. So it's a great script.
So you're 77, but as you've mentioned twice, and the world is your oyster. Isn't it amazing?
It's pretty incredible. I mean, it really is. I mean, I would never, I'm just sorry that some of my relations aren't around anymore to witness, that it's all worked out rather well in the end.
And meanwhile, of course, I've enjoyed you extolling the virtues of the sesame seeds on the bun of a quarter pounder recently. As the voice of McDonald's, how in the fuck did that happen?
Well, I used to do a lot of voice. I mean, when I came to America in 1996, came to live here, because I decided I'd done everything that I could do, and I had a great career, but I still wanted to do movies. That was my childhood ambition. And we do television in the UK, but we don't really do movies. And I thought, well, I'll go. But I had to give up my voiceover career, which was pretty good in the UK, and I couldn't get arrested for voiceovers here for 20 years. Suddenly, Logan Roy and McDonald's go hand in hand, which is a bizarre situation. So, and I love it. And the copywriters, he said, when you get into it and you see these young writers writing these very tight things and being really rather brilliant, you forget what, and they all want to be proper writers, but that's how they earn their living. So it's a great job. I loved it.
Will you do the thing at the end?
Oh, ba da ba ba ba, yeah.
Do it better.
I can't. I can't do it. I've always got to listen to it before I do it.
Well, I think you sound great in it, and it makes me want a quarter pounder. Well, Frank Rich was right. Not only are you the easiest interview of my career, but one of the most fun. So, Brian Cox. And by the way, I bought you a present.
Okay, this is all I have to say to you now.
I cleaned it up.